Hello, and welcome back to the Pup and Away podcast. My name is Steph. I am your pro dog mom. I am also a certified dog trainer, canine behaviorist, canine nutritionist, and the very proud owner of Pup and Away in San Antonio, Texas, where we specialize in pet care with the behavioral edge. That's boarding, that's socialization, all different types of training. So if you're in San Antonio, come find me. Even if you're not in San Antonio, I can do a lot of things virtually. So I've become aware of the fact that I haven't had a training episode in quite some time. I've been hitting the nutrition stuff a lot. I've had a lot of guests on the podcast. And so I kind of wanted to look at things a little bit more from a training perspective today. But at the end of the day, everything that I'm really excited about at the moment is a little bit more on the nutrition side, which is why we've had so much nutrition content. So today I kind of want to bridge the gap between those two things because as a behaviorist, I deal with a lot of clients who are trying to modify behaviors, right? Their dogs are leash reactive, their dogs have separation anxiety, their dogs are exhibiting some aggressive tendencies towards new people. So they, come to me for some training advice, which is important, but it's also really important for us to be looking at training from a holistic standpoint as well. Now, what does holistic mean? It just means as a whole, right? So behavior modification is not only about teaching your dog behaviors, because oftentimes these aggressive behaviors, these aggressive tendencies, these anxious behaviors, sometimes they're not really a choice that your dog is making. They're more of a response to an overloaded, stressed nervous system. So one thing that we have to, many things that we have to do, right, because it's from a holistic standpoint, there's more than just one. Not only work with training techniques, but also to look at what are some of the other things that your dog is experiencing as far as diet and nutrition, as far as regular exercise and enrichment, as far as other external stress factors. What are other things that are going on in the home? What does that routine look like? What is your attachment style with your dog? So a lot of parenting, techniques come into play there as well. And oftentimes when I bring up some of these things with a client that has hired me for training, and I try to go down the route of like, well, what are you feeding your dog? And let's talk about that. It's not uncommon for me to get like, well, why are we spending time on talking about my dog food? People have a hard time understanding the correlation between nutrition and diet and the behaviors of their dog. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of bridging those gaps together. So this is going to be a little bit of a training episode as well as a nutrition episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So the first thing that we want to talk about is really the biology of the dog. I've had a few episodes where we talk about, the biology of adolescence, and we're talking about neuroscience and different things like that. All of those things are really important to consider whenever we are going into a training plan, not because you need to have a biology lesson, but again, in order for you to trust me, just like I encourage you guys to always ask questions to your other pet professionals. Why are we doing this? Why are we looking at food? Sometimes it starts with a little bit of a biology lesson. So the first thing that we want to really look at is the gut-brain axis. This is a more, not slang term, but a more relaxed term for what we call what's known as the vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve is one of about a dozen cranial nerves, which means it goes from the brain, and it's a nerve that stems to different parts of our body. And it has a bidirectional communication link from the brain and all the body systems. So you got your nervous system, you got your gut, you got your kidneys, you got all the different body systems. And so it includes the gut. And so like when you look at this on a diagram, the brain's at the top, you see this like big nerve, you see the gut at the bottom, and then you have all these other branching systems, right? Because that's kind of what the body kind of looks like. On this nerve is the railway, is kind of what I like to say, of neurotransmitters that are going to go to and from the gut and the brain, and of course all the not extra because it's all whole, but all these other body systems as well. And so some of the very important neurotransmitters that we want to consider are serotonin, which is your feel-good hormone. And probably I've said this before on the podcast, but 85 to 90%-ish of serotonin is made in the gut. We also want to consider cortisol. Cortisol is going to be your stress hormone. When you have too much cortisol in your body, you're a little bit more in your sympathetic nervous state. So you're more in that fight or flight versus that rest and digest. And then there's other things like GABA, which helps you bounce back into a parasympathetic rest and digest state from that fight or flight state. And there's a few other ones, but those are kind of the ones that I'm most interested in as far as like behavior and stuff goes. So when we're talking about this access and all the different things that are going back and forth, and knowing that a bunch of neurotransmitters that regulate mood, help the body deal with stress are these little commuters on this railway, we start to really understand why it's important that the gut, which is one of those main train stations on this railway, is really important to always be healthy and in balance. Because when the gut is in dysbiosis, we have too many pathogenic bacteria. It really messes up with the production of some of these neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, which is really important. Now, serotonin is a chemical in our body, neurotransmitter, that a lot of medications will work on when we're talking about depression and anxiety and different things like that. That is what an SSRI is, and something that we've talked about in previous episodes when it comes to like pharmaceuticals and different things like that. It's going to help the body sort of recycle the serotonin so that way we have more of it in the system while the body is making some more. So serotonin is super duper important. So another thing that I always get asked is like, well, where's the science, right? Where are the studies that are going to support whatever you're telling me? There's a bunch of different ones, but I picked just a few of them for us to go over because some of you guys love to ask questions, and that's what I'm here for. So in 2019, there was a study on rats, and I get some people are like, well, that's on rats. Like, we're talking about dogs. Absolutely, but the same reason that, not that I agree with, but that we work and experiment on animals is to extrapolate that to humans. Some of the same findings can be extrapolated to dogs, to humans, to other species and different things like that. So yes, this study is over mice. I think I said rats earlier. Not the same thing, but pretty much what they did in the study was they looked at these mice and they labeled them extroverted or introverted based off of a variety of different behaviors that they were exhibiting, and if they displayed more behaviors that are categorized as extroverted or more behaviors that are categorized as introverted. Then what they did is they took the poop from the different groups and they did a fecal transplant to the other side. So if you're unaware, yes, fecal transplants are a thing. Basically what ends up happening is you take the poop. I don't know what kind of processing is done. That's not obviously something that I do or have partaken in, just, it's not something I've done. But they basically take the poop from a healthy gut microbiome, and then they transplant that into someone who has a gut in dysbiosis with the theory of transplanting the good bacteria from the stool. So what they did was they collected the feces from both groups and then they transplanted it into the other group. So the extroverted mice got transplanted the introverted feces, and the introverted mice got transplanted the extroverted feces. A lot to think about there. And what they found was the mice that were once extroverted, who have now received the fecal transplant from the introverted mice, became more introverted, and the introverted mice who received the transplant from the extroverted mice became more extroverted. So again, we start to see how something just as simple as swapping poop can change the behaviors of these mice with no other sort of changes there. So that shows just how important that gut microbiome is. In 2019 also, we had a study that was done in dogs. So 21 pit bull-like type dogs were rescued from a fight organization, and they were deemed either aggressive or non-aggressive. Again, the scientists put together behaviors that are aggressive, behaviors that are not aggressive, and watched to see how many of each one these dogs displayed, and then labeled them from there. What they then did, of course, is they took the fecal samples from these animals, and they found that all the dogs that were labeled aggressive had very similar strains found in their feces. So they had more pathogenic bacteria in their gut, and they were all very similar. And then the dogs that were in the non-aggressive also had kind of very similar gut microbiome, and they were less pathogenic, more beneficial bacteria. So again, we start to see the correlation between what is going on in our gut and how it is manifesting itself outwards in the form of behavior. In 2015, a study found that consuming probiotics, specifically in the form of fermented foods, significantly reduced overall cognitive depression and depressive thoughts. So a probiotic is going to add even more of these strains of beneficial bacteria into your gut. So whenever we had the introduction of more beneficial strains of bacteria in the gut, again, we saw a change in our behavior. And that one was done in humans. So, because who else is going to talk about their depressive thoughts besides humans? So just a few studies there. And again, there's a few more, but I wanted to cherry pick a couple of them for you. So that way I didn't spend a whole hour talking about studies and their findings. So we also know that the benefits of minimally processed foods, and that's always something that I'm trying to talk to you guys and any of my clients about, is how can we start to feed your dogs a fresher food diet? And that can look like a variety of different ways, but why is it important? Again, what is the science? What is a minimally processed diet going to be giving my dog to have that positive effect on behavior? So first, we know that whole foods have all of the cofactors that are needed for nutrients to be absorbed, digested, and utilized. So what does that mean? It means that a food has a bunch of different nutrients, right? But there's also cofactors, whether they're other materials, other nutrients, that are going to help those vitamins and those minerals be readily used by the body. And without these cofactors, the body isn't really having a chance to process it, digest it, and utilize it the same way. So we find that minerals and vitamins that are found in whole foods are going to have a better bioavailability for the body. The more nutrient dense a food is, the more it's going to be feeding that good gut bacteria and the body as a whole, and the more that body is going to be operating in a clean, healthy manner. We also know that minimally processed foods, so more wholer foods, are going to be giving you a more diverse microbiome. And that's what we're looking for when it comes to, gut health, and we're talking about dysbiosis or, swinging it to be a healthy gut. We're not just looking for a gut that only has good bacteria. It's important that we also have some of that pathogenic bacteria as well. We just want more beneficial bacteria than the pathogenic bacteria. So we really want a good diversity of bacteria in our gut. And again, there's thousands of strains. I don't know exactly how many. We're probably still finding out more, but the more diversity that we have, the better. And so a study found in 2018 found that feeding a fresher food diet was going to create more diversity, thus creating a better gut microbiome, thus creating better behavior. And we also know that naturally occurring more stable pre and probiotics are what's going to be available in our whole foods, in our minimally processed diet. So those prebiotics are going to be feeding the bacteria in your gut. Your probiotics are going to be adding even more diversity to that bacteria in your gut. So it's really important that we're doing both, because any type of food that you're eating, you're feeding that gut bacteria. Foods that are highly processed, foods that are high in sugar content are going to be feeding more of the pathogenic bacteria, which is why you start to crave it. The more that you eat it, the more that you crave it, and then you stop eating it and you crave it more. It's because those little bacteria in your gut is saying, hey, remember that sugar? Hey, I need that sugar to live. Can we please get some more of that so that way I can keep living? Great. thanks. So any type of food that you're eating is super important to what you're feeding in your gut microbiome. Now let's get on to the opposite end and talk about highly processed foods and its nutritional detriments. Why are things like kibble and other highly processed foods bad when we have vets recommending it, whenever we have complete and balanced written on the bag, whenever this became a $1 billion, maybe $1 trillion industry, how is this happening if it's not going to be, if it has nutritional detriments, right? So the first thing that we want to consider is the more that a food is processed, the less nutrient dense it becomes, okay? So when we're talking about kibble, it goes through multiple high heat processes called extrusion to finally give you that kibble at the end of the day. We also have to think about the types of ingredients that are going into this. It's not always starting out with the whole chicken breast being put in the vat. Sometimes it's already a processed version of that chicken, a chicken meal or a chicken byproduct. That means it's already been processed, some nutrients has already been lost, and then we're putting it through multiple high heat temperatures of cooking. So we're going to be losing a lot of that nutrients as it goes through the line. We also know that there's going to be more synthetic vitamins and minerals in our kibbles and in our highly processed diets because we just cooked out a bunch of that the nutrients. So when you look at the back of the bag, you're going to find, closer towards the end, all these vitamins and minerals, and that's because they had to add that into there. And usually it's going to come in a synthetic form, these little vitamin packets and things like that. Just like we talked about before, when vitamins and minerals are given in whole foods, whenever we're doing synthetics, we are missing those cofactors that are going to be present in those whole foods. So whenever we're missing those cofactors, we're not going to be digesting and absorbing and utilizing those nutrients the same way as we did in those whole foods. So some people are like, well, there's more, because if you think about it, or a synthetic formula might have a bunch of a specific vitamin, whereas a whole food might have just a little bit of that of that vitamin or mineral. So you get a high amount versus maybe a smaller amount, but what is your body doing with that high amount? Are we actually going to be able to be utilizing it, period, if we're missing the cofactors that the body needs to be able to even break it down and use it? And I don't know what quite the answer is, what percentage it is. I'm sure it's different depending on the body, depending on the nutrient. But we're missing out on a lot of that right there, because the body doesn't know how to recognize these synthetic minerals or vitamins. It doesn't know what to do. So when the body gets injected or introduced a foreign object, the body fights back against it, which is why we see some things with the inflammation, which is why we see some sensitivities and tolerances that Elena Stanley talked about a couple of episodes back, or was that, about 2 episodes back, I think, that dogs are not utilizing these synthetic vitamins and minerals because they're simply just fake. And then we get ourselves into a situation where maybe we have malabsorption. So now your dog is not, it's not being nourished the right way. So we're missing those vitamins and minerals being placed in the body. Or sometimes, like I said, because in these vitamin packets, we get an excess of these vitamins and minerals. So now what we also can be doing is creating a toxicity for our dogs. And not too long ago, there was a whole big vitamin D toxicity that was hurting and killing a lot of dogs, because these companies were putting too much vitamin D. The body didn't know what to do with it. It stored it in the fat and the lining of different parts of the body, and then the body didn't know what to do with it. So it created a toxicity in the body because it wasn't utilizing and going through the proper waste channels. So again, we're denaturing and getting rid of the nutrients in our highly processed foods, then we're adding in synthetic vitamins and minerals. The body just doesn't know what to do with it. The other thing that we're denaturing too is those probiotics that we were just talking about. Oftentimes, whenever you're looking at the bag, it says, a special formulated, brand-specific probiotic blend to help digestion and things like that, which sounds amazing from the pet parent. We know how beneficial probiotics can be. Ooh, I take probiotics too. Now my dog is getting probiotics as well. But what happens is these probiotic blends that are added by these companies, they're not shelf stable. They can't really tolerate oxygen. So probiotics are live organisms that we should be eating and then should be populating our gut. So if companies are adding them to the ingredients list and then cooking it, well, or killing it also. If we're adding it to the end after it's been extruded and after it's been processed, maybe it'll last for a little while, but that 50-pound bag that is meant to sit on the shelf for 2 years, those probiotics are not going to last in there. So while it was, A for effort from the company, what your dog is actually getting after they're eating is very minimal, if anything. And the other thing that we start to see too is a lot of harmful ingredients can be added into these highly processed foods. Dyes like Red 40, you might be surprised how often there are different dyes and colors in dog food. Like Beneful is one that comes to mind, where you see these reds, these greens, and these oranges, and you think that it's, the spinach, you think it's the carrots, but they're dyes. Every single one of those pellets came out the same color. Some of them went to get dyed green, some of them went to go get dyed red, and then they all came together into this, this bag. And so these dyes and these colors are known to be neurotoxic chemicals. They're toxic to our neurosystem. And that's why we see, especially in humans, like Red 40, for example, is something that has been directly correlated to things like ADHD and hyperactivity in children, because it's really messing up that nervous system. But the biggest thing in all kibble, so that's just, not every kibble has a color or a dye, but every kibble is going to be high in carbs. And a lot of the over-processed foods too. So a lot of your canned foods will still be high in carbs. People ask me all the time about like Fresh Pet and Farmer's Dog. Those are also going to be high in carbs as well. And in 1987, a study was done and it found that dogs fed a high carbohydrate diet displayed more active and excitable behaviors, while dogs that were fed a high protein diet were calmer and they were more relaxed. And again, that's just because we're feeding that nervous system to be up and wired the entire time. So as soon as the body gets introduced a stimulus from the outside, because it's already wired up to a high frequency, it doesn't take much for us to become reactive, more excitable. We're also talking about the sugar content of different things, and how that feeds really unclean, not sustainable energy, as much as like a good healthy protein and a good healthy fat as well. There's also a lot of indirect nutritional effects that highly processed foods may have. So the first one, if your dog is hangry, I know when I haven't eaten, I get hangry. You can ask my husband, he knows that he's experienced that firsthand many, many times. But when the body is not being fed nutritious food, there's going to be an internal, whether it's not just like your stomach is feeling hungry, but the body itself is being deprived of the nutrients. And so we see a lot of that happen in just how that mood is going to be displayed. We also see that poor health leads to more irritability. If you have kidney issues, if you have skin issues, any sort of issue, even if you have a headache, right? You're more irritable, you're not yourself, you're gonna be a little bit crankier, more reactive, and the same thing happens for our dogs. If our dogs are experiencing joint pain because their body is completely inflamed, that doesn't feel good. So therefore, when you touch them in that certain spot, they might turn and try to bite you all of a sudden. So we see the irritability and the aggressiveness happens whenever we are dealing with poor health, and highly processed foods can definitely be feeding that poor health. The body does not know what to do with these highly processed ingredients, so we get poor digestion and then we get more inflammation. So we get things like leaky gut, which is the lining of your stomach starts to create these holes. And so we get foreign food that gets pushed out of the gut lining, things that should be going and getting digested further down in the digestional tract to be broken down, digested, utilized, absorbed, but instead it's being released into the body a little bit too soon before it was broken down to the right pieces. And so the body is like, this is a foreign object. I don't know what to do with it. So let's store it somewhere to create more inflammation. Let's store it somewhere to create more fat. Let's put this in this I don't know what to do pile. And then eventually your body has too many pieces that it doesn't know how to get rid of it. And therefore we create more inflammation. So leaky gut is something that's really important for us to be looking at, and something that a lot of humans and dogs are also experiencing right now. Brain fog is another indirect side effect of having highly processed food. And this is something that I think most people can relate to. Whenever you go and you eat, something very junky, you don't feel good afterwards. Not only does your stomach hurt, but maybe also you're just not on your A game mentally, versus after you've had a meal high in protein and high in fat, and that fat is feeding the brain and cognitive function. It just feels better. You're more on fire. You're more just ready to kind of tackle on the day. You're not lethargic. You're not being weighed heavily and not being able to get through your day. So that brain fog is also something that our dogs can experience as well. But the biggest one that I'm most interested in, it's not the most important one, it's just the one that I'm most interested in, is feeding a highly processed diet is going to be creating dysbiosis, inflammation, allergies, intolerances, and all of those things are going to manifest in different ways. Skin issues, ear issues, diarrhea. And so we take our dogs to the vet because that's not normal. And the vets look at our dogs, and instead of trying to figure out where is this coming from, why are we having this issue in the first place, we give a medication to fix the problem. And one of those things is usually Apoquil. So if you have a very itchy dog, your vet looks at them, maybe they're going to prescribe them Apoquil. Another one is Cytopoint. In the pamphlet that is given with that Apoquil is a study that the company did, Zoetis, or I think it's called Zoetis, Zoetis. And it was a study of 283 dogs. And it lists all the different side effects and the percentage of those dogs that experience these side effects. One of them was aggressive tendencies. 1.1% of the 283 dogs experienced more aggression. And when you read, it's only 1.1, that's such a small number. Okay, that's totally fine. But when you see that sample size is 283, and then you also take into account that 13 million dogs have been prescribed Apoquil, if you were to extrapolate that 1.1%, that is 143,000 dogs that are experiencing more aggression. And aggression is not something to take lightly. This is why dogs get surrendered to shelters. This is why dogs get dumped. I mean, there's plenty of other reasons too, right? But it's a big reason why those things happen. It's a reason why some shelters are like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to adopt that dog out. Let's just go ahead and euthanize it. That's why people choose to have behavioral euthanasia. And so only 1.1% aggression has really big consequences for that 1.1%. Or you're going to have to go and find, a professional like me and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and a lot of time and energy to help your dog deal with / get rid of these behaviors. So that's a very interesting number. And so it's really important for us to take into consideration what highly processed food is doing to the body, what it's doing to the nervous system, and what we're doing to the body as an ecosystem, because that's the jumping off platform that your dog has to be making decisions, right? We aren't just a mind that is in a body. We are a mind that is experiencing life from a very organic molecular level, and all of those things play a part into our behavior and how it's going to manifest outwardly, not just in what my hair looks like, my skin feels like, if I have a pooch on my tummy, but it's also going to feed into how I act as a person and how your dog is going to act as a dog. So it's really important for us to consider that. The minimally processed food, whatever that looks like for you, and we'll get into some of those things in just a second, is really going to be feeding the body, which is the thing that's, acting out. And so it's important for us to think about the nervous system and what kind of what's going on internally, because it's not just the brain, it's also, that nervous system that is making behavior. I think I'm just talking in a circle now because I don't like how I've said any of that, but hopefully you get it by now. So what can we do, right? Because maybe sometimes feeding raw isn't for everybody, right? Maybe we really do need to be feeding a kibble. And so I'm going to be giving you a couple of different things that we want to be looking at, not just how to pick a kibble, because that's something that we've covered in previous episodes, and maybe something I can cover a little bit more deeply in a different episode, but I also want to give you more specific things to consider and ways for us to be introducing minimally processed foods for your dogs. So the first one is just feed as minimally processed as you can. Whether that's raw, whether that's gently cooked, whether that is something that is commercially bought and cooked, like a gently cooked option, whatever the case may be, or feeding a better kibble. But there's, again, let's look at things on a scientific term. So we're gonna be talking about some few different vitamins and minerals and some different foods that are gonna be high in those vitamins and minerals, and why those vitamins and minerals are gonna be really important for your dog. And also for you too, right? So the first one is vitamin B5. Vitamin B5 is going to be your anti-stress vitamin. It's going to help you deal with that cortisol. And some foods that are going to be high in vitamin B5 are going to be organ meats. That can be heart, kidney, liver. Different animals are going to have other different nutritional profiles with that. So, you can look into the difference between beef liver and goat liver. But organ meats are going to be very high in that. Dark meat, chicken, salmon, and egg yolks. I have a whole document on foods for stress that I give my clients, and this is just a few of those things that I took from that. So this is not an exhaustive list. That would take a long time for us to get through. These are just things that I just kind of randomly, again, picked just to have an easy conversation with you guys. So another one, vitamin B6, that's going to help us synthesize neurotransmitters. So when your body is given nutrients, sometimes you get something like tryptophan, and tryptophan has to be broken down so that way it can be synthesized into serotonin. So tryptophan is known as a precursor to serotonin. The more tryptophan that we have in our body, the more serotonin it can make from that. We'll get to tryptophan in just a second, but that's why feeding a vitamin that is important for neurotransmitter synthesis is important. So foods that are going to be high in vitamin B6 are going to include things like chicken, turkey, avocado, and leafy greens. But Steph, I thought dogs couldn't have avocado. They absolutely can. That study was done on some, I don't know how many dogs, but dogs that were able to eat high quantities of avocado, and then also, which has a high fat content, but also the pits are going to be not good for your dog nutritionally, and also they can, swallow and choke on that. So yes, your dogs can have avocado. We just want to make sure that we're giving the meat, the green part of the avocado, and not that pit. And, sometimes too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. You can die from drinking too much water. It's extreme, but you get where I'm going with this. Vitamin C. Most of us think of vitamin C as a vitamin that's going to support the immune system, which is true, but it also helps lower cholesterol. I have cholesterol in the brain. It also helps lower cortisol. And like we said before, cortisol is the stress hormone. So whenever you're experiencing stress, your cortisol level is going to rise. Vitamin C can help bring down that cortisol level, which I think is super cool and not something that vitamin C gets talked about too often for. So foods that are going to be high in vitamin C, citrus fruits, obviously, things like your oranges and things like that. Berries are going to be high in vitamin C, as well as bell pepper, papaya, and tomatoes. So those also just sound like the tastiest foods that I've mentioned so far. Tryptophan is next on the list. Again, tryptophan is going to be your precursor of serotonin. That is going to be high in foods like turkey, bananas, chicken, and eggs. Now you might be thinking, hey Steph, you're talking about chicken a lot, but I thought dogs were kind of allergic to chicken. It depends on the dog. And also, it depends on the quality of the chicken as well. Again, a already processed version of chicken going through further processing, it looks way different than feeding a pasture-raised well, a little bit of processing maybe for humans, but raw chicken can be way different. Every dog is different. If your dog has you already know for sure that your dog has a sensitivity or an allergy or an intolerance to chicken. Don't take my word for it and just go feed chicken and say, well, Steph said if I did raw chicken. I don't know. It might be worth a shot. It might not be. It's completely up to you. But I just wanted to clarify that about chicken, since I think it's been talked about in 3 of our lists already. The next one is magnesium. Magnesium, just like us, right? It's going to help regulate sleep and mood. Foods that are going to be high in magnesium include multiple different types of fish, and obviously, depending on the fish, is going to have different levels of magnesium. We got organ meats again, bone and bone meal. Spinach and cucumber are also going to be high. Cucumber is a great summer snack, is high in water as well. Something that I like to give my dogs pretty often, so magnesium is fun. We also talk about different types of functional mushrooms as well. A lot of mushrooms are going to improve brain function, regulate the nervous system, reduce anxiety. We have turkey tail reishi mushroom, some people say reishi, and lion's mane. Again, there's a couple of other ones, and then each one of those mushrooms also have other benefits as well. Lion's mane is also good for cognitive function. Turkey tail, if I remember, is good for like working out, like helping the blood get oxygenated. I'm not too sure on that though, now that I'm saying. That's cordyceps. So each mushroom has a different profile as well, but those are just a few that you can consider. We also have adaptogens and herbs. Now, if you've already listened to our conversation with Rita Hogan, you have to also consider your dog's energetics with this. Is your dog hot, cold, warm, slightly cool, neutral? Are they damp? Are they dry? That has a lot to do when you're picking out the right herbs for your dogs. For example, ashwagandha is a great herb that's going to promote relaxation and improve the nervous system. But ashwagandha is a warm herb. So if you have already a warm to hot dog, like Sully is a warm to hot dog, giving him ashwagandha is going to add even more warmth to his energetics and might not have the same effect on him. So it's important to also keep some of those things in mind. And I am not the best person to tell you about all of those things as we move forward with every single one of them, but just something to consider. Asian ginseng is going to promote, is an antioxidant to help the body recover from the effects of stress. That's when we talk about oxidative stress. Cells are going to go through oxidative stress and going to make more free radicals, which are foreign. I'm probably not going to explain this really well. You basically have an incomplete cell, so then it tries to grab other ones, and then you just have oxidative stress, and so it damages the cell. And when the cell does not get repaired is also another way that we get things like inflammation and like cancerous cells and things like that. So we want to be repairing the cell through antioxidants. That's what antioxidants do. So that's what Asian ginseng is going to give you, and why so many people like to eat and feed blueberries as well, because blueberries are high in antioxidants. Bacopa monnieri is another herb that's going to improve memory and cognitive function as well. Lavender is a great one to help regulate mood. Chamomile is going to reduce anxiety. And there's many different ways that you can be giving these herbs and these adaptogens. Chamomile, for example, can be made into a tea. Ashwagandha comes in, supplement form. Lavender can be in an essential oil, a dried herb. There's many different ways that you can be giving these herbs and these adaptogens to your dogs as well. Now, we talked a lot about probiotics and how that is going to add more beneficial bacteria to your gut microbiome, but specific strains are going to do specific things. You have specific strains for like skin health, hair health. There's going to be specific strains that are going to help regulate mood, help the body deal with stress, regulate brain function, mood, prevent inflammation. And so there's a few like families and then species. I think that's a family. Can't remember my classification system right off the bat. But a few that we want to look at is bifidobacterium. So that's something like B. longum is going to be one of them. Lactobacillus. So that's going to be our L. rhamnosus that we see in there. And a few other ones. It's going to be really hard for you to remember all of those because they're very scientific words and things like that. But there are very specific probiotics that we can be looking at. And if you would like a very specific list, you're more than welcome to email me at stephanie@puppupandawaysa.com or find me on any of the socials and DM me there. I'm a little slow to get to those, but I'll get to them and send them to you. I can also send you my Foods for Stress. That's going to talk about even more foods and even more vitamins and minerals to consider feeding your dog, which is also going to have pretty much everything that we just talked about. So one of my favorite probiotics to recommend to a client is one by Adored Beast, because it's going to have 14 different strains of probiotics. So we get, again, a diversity that we want to be looking at. 4 of those strains are going to be some of the ones that are going to help with mood regulation and stress, and it has 30 billion CFUs, which is, oh man, colony, I forgot exactly what CFUs is, but it's the measuring system for your probiotics. Now, the funny thing is, so if you go to the vet, right, and you ask them for a probiotic, most likely they're going to give you Purina Pro Plan Calming Care. That's just kind of like, one of their things that they recommend because they love to push that Purina. But let's talk about some of the downfalls of that. So first off, I already told you that the Adored Beast has 14 strains of probiotics going for that diversity. The Calming Care has 1 strain. Just 1. Not much diversity going on there. Like I said, that the Adored Beast has 4 strains to benefit mood. Your Calming Care has 1. It's just got the 1. Again, not much diversity there. Your Adored Beast is going to have 30 billion CFU. Your Calming Care has 1 billion. So 30 times less and less diverse. But for whatever reason, that's the one that the vets love to choose. No, that's not because Purina's, pushing them for stuff. That would never happen. The other things that I don't really love about the Purina Calming Care is it has flavors. There's got liver flavor in it. And whenever you see things like flavors, you don't know what exactly is in there. If it's artificial, if it's natural, why isn't it just dehydrated liver? Why does it have to be flavor? Anyways, so that is probiotics. And other things that you can do, and again, we've talked about before, we've had Angela Ardolino on the podcast to give us all kinds of information about CBD, but CBD is one of my most favorite things to recommend to clients because a lot of them have great benefits on this. Whenever you're looking at your CBD, my favorite one obviously is CBD Dog Health, but pick a full spectrum CBD. It does have trace amounts of THC, less than 0.03%, but it's necessary. It's not a high enough dosage to have the psychedelic effects, but it needs to be in the product because it's a cofactor to the other cannabinoids, the CBD, CBC, CBG, all the other ones that are going to be beneficial. So without that THC, you're giving all of these cannabinoids and the body is not fully absorbing and utilizing them because the THC is what helps the cannabinoids, the beneficial medicine, absorb and be utilized into our internal cannabinoid system. So very important for you to have a full spectrum CBD, as well as looking at what other fillers do you have in there? Do you have flavors? Do you have, one of my favorite things about the CBD Dog Health is it does have some of the adaptogenic herbs that we talked about, Bacopa monnieri being one of them. I think lavender is in some of theirs. formulas, but those are going to have a synergistic effect and help each other out, and just give your dog a little bit more of that boost. So you want to be careful about what kind of oils are being used. I love seeing a good MCT oil being used. You don't want to see a bunch of other junk fillers. I wish I can think of a very specific one to tell you guys to look out for, because that's why you're listening, right? For a very specific advice, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. But look out for flavors, beef like smoke flavored, bacon flavor. You don't need that. It's just gonna cheapen the product and give your dog another something. Like, you're giving the body something that's going to cause it inflammation when you're trying to give it something to decrease inflammation. Like, it's an oxymoron there, and it's just not happening. So that is all my notes that I had for you guys today. I'm sorry if it wasn't very eloquent and very planned out. It was something that I just I actually had put this information together for another presentation that I did a couple of years ago, and then I was getting ready to present it in another podcast, but we actually talked about something not completely different, but kind of different. I was just recently on the Tony Unleashed podcast. Literally just recorded it, and I was like, all my notes are right in front of me. I might as well just get on here and record a conversation with you guys for it. So I hope that gives you some actionable items and gives you some information as to, man, why should we be looking at food and nutrition and diet when it comes to our mental health and our behavior, and especially for our dogs as well, because we're so advised by so many pet professionals to feed a highly processed diet. And we just need to ask why, and we need to ask, why do you think that is going to be beneficial for my dog? And we also need to be asking, well, what's the opposite? Can it actually be detrimental to our dog? And when we extrapolate the information that we are given for ourselves about eating healthy, whole foods, minimally processed diet, and how we feel when we're eating those sorts of things, it's not hard to understand it. It's hard to implement different changes, right? Because cost or accessibility or ease. But that's where I'm come in to help you guys out, to figure out what is your goal, how far do you want to take this, what are you willing to do, what are you not willing to do. And again, it could be something as simple as, okay, maybe you're still going to feed that kibble, but maybe you're also going to do a little bit of some ground turkey and take out 10% of that kibble portion and replace that with the turkey. Or maybe you're going to be giving your dog those cucumbers more often for that. I forgot which one that was. For that magnesium. No, I don't remember all these things. I literally cannot remember what foods are high in different things. That's why I take notes and have them very accessible to me. But maybe that's why you're going to start feeding foods that are high in vitamin C once you get your dog back from boarding. Or once you took that group class and your dog was a little stressed out, you're going to go home and feed it a few more berries, right? Because they're high in that vitamin C to help your dog deal with that cortisol that they just experienced. So I hope this gives you some things to be adding into your food bowl. Maybe you're not changing it completely, but who knows? Maybe one day you will. Now, that might be the end of the episode, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Follow us on social media. I'd love to connect with you. We have quite a few social media platforms. For nutrition and holistic pet care tips, follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Steph the Pro Dog Mom. You can find fun training tips on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Pup and Away SA. If you're in San Antonio and you want to bring your dog to us for boarding, training, socialization, and nutrition, come find us. But if you're not in San Antonio, we do training and nutrition sessions virtually. Yes, they can be just as effective, I promise. Please rate, review, and subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen on. And please, please, please share with a friend. The positive reinforcement of knowing people actually listen to this and find it valuable helps motivate me to keep on recording. We'll see you guys at the next episode.